I'm glad everybody came, and oh my gosh, I'm awestruck up here with my guests. So this is a topic we've been looking forward to, and I'm going to introduce three incredible panelists to us, a couple coming from out of town and one which is here in the Queen City. So ecstatic to have all of them with us, ecstatic to talk about payments. And when you're talking about payments, you talk about two big things, technology and the humans, right? And the people. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So I am excited to do that along with my crew. So let's go from left to right. I'm going to have them introduce themselves because that's always the nice thing to do. And we're going to start from the left with Dr. Katie Odell. So Katie, if you can introduce yourself and then we'll move down the line.
Thank you, Dr. John. Hi, everyone. I'm Katie Odell. I've known John for a few years. I am currently at Visa. I am the VP of Consumer Credit and North America Loyalty. And I've been in the industry for about 32 years. You'll hear me talk about my days as a customer service rep all the way up to where I am today. I'm also a part-time adjunct professor. I teach ethics in business and global strategy at Wilmington University in Delaware. Glad to be here. Thanks, Sean.
Awesome. I'm excited you are here. Second, this is a double-decade friend of mine. I'm very excited you're here. Donna Turner, please introduce yourself.
Donna Turner, who just learned how to turn on a microphone. New skill. That's why I don't have my doctorate, Katie.
I had somebody turn the microphone on. I outsourced it.
I am on my third phase of career, retired banker, predominantly Bank of America. Like many of you in the room, I did the gamut from operations, ran debit card for a while, did risk management, but spent the final 10 years of my career there with what I said was the coolest job in the bank. Helping to build out and then ultimately lead our enterprise fraud solution. That wasn't challenging enough. So retired and I went to early warning services where we created this little thing called Zelle. Got that, I was their chief operations officer and retired from that a couple years ago. And is what you're going to take from this is I suck at retiring. I now do a little advisory work. I joined EY as an advisor in residence, which when my husband says, what do you do? I think I'm a corporate fraud professor is basically what, without the doctorate. No disrespect, you two. I was telling Jen Bowman earlier, my goals are to make sure more hours of my day are now in tennis and golf than in my office. So loving it. And I'm going to do a 6 degree of separation connection here that Christy probably doesn't even know. I was actually one of her Women in Payments honorees. It was a while ago. You're safe. Just leave the year out. So, Christy.
It's Christy Duncan. Thank you coming down from the cold weather of Toronto, and we appreciate you being here.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here. Happy to be in this warmer climate. Happy to be here as the engineer who does know how to turn on my microphone. I tell people I'm an engineer by training, a banker by trade, and a payments geek by nature. I worked at a big green bank in Canada for many years, then consulted in the market for many more years, and then started Women in Payments on the side of my desk back in 2012. So we're now in 6 markets around the world. We run conferences and career development programs and all kinds of things designed to give women career growth opportunities in this market and beyond. So
I'm going to glom on here for all the women in the room. If you don't belong, you should. And thank you for what you have done for women in this industry.
That is awesome. Oh, so you can see why I am pumped to have the three of them. I'm honored. So thank you all for being here. The topic is huge. This is a topic that I know Method has spent a lot of time with, a lot of the clients that Method works with. You know, this is the space, and it's a space I've spent 23 years in and learned from the one in the middle in a lot of aspects. So very excited to dig into it. And like, you know, Christy talked about, and then Donna went on the top, talent has a lot to do with it. The technology itself continues to evolve, right? Payments has been around since barter, coin, check, cash, keeps going. And then everybody here in the room keeps coming up with new stuff, and then the fraud people in the room got to deal with it. So I get it. The biggest piece is, though, it doesn't stop. and it takes certain talents to do what it does. So I really want to, for the audience here and the audience that's out remote, really get a good understanding from experts. What does it take? What are they seeing? And that's some of the questions we'll go through. So what now? And then what's coming? That'll be the second part of it, right? Tech is going to be A, human is going to be B. So that's how we're going to focus on it in the panel. So to kick it off, what I will do is probably throw the first question out to the Dr. Katie Odell. And the question that I will pose is thinking about State of the Union right now. You've made some moves. You've had career moves. You've been at every bank I think I can think of in the United States and anyone that matters. And now sitting on the other side of the curtain. So talk to me about what are you seeing, your lens? I'd love to hear that. And then we'll go down the line.
Awesome. Thanks, John. So thank you for giving a brief history of my career. It's been a great ride. I've spent a lot of time on the credit card space, so I know a lot about it. And now, like you said, I'm behind the curtain. And I think what's interesting is seeing the commonalities, the common needs across the industry, across the players, from everyone from fintech, neobanks, community issuers, credit unions, to the regional everyone is trying to make sure that payments are safe and accessible to a wide segment of the audience. And that's our job, is to make sure that we have the products and services to meet those needs. Yeah, so I'll turn it over.
Yeah, Donna, over to you. Same kind of question, probably with a little bit of a different twist, but what are you seeing, State of the Union?
At two ends of the spectrum, I see tech actually outpacing demand right now. AI, right? Yep. We don't know exactly how to use it yet. So that's what a great real life example for me of the tech has outpaced the demand. We're figuring out the problem we're solving for with this new technology. And at the other end of the payments spectrum, I see us not learning from history. Mm-hmm. I see a lot of the emerging capabilities haven't learned from the sins of the past, whether it's economics or consumer protection or whatever. And that kind of drives me a little bit nuts.
Yeah, the past is interesting, and the outpacing isn't just today. I think we've outpaced for a long time. The other piece that we've talked a lot about is it takes a lot of talent also to keep up from an ethics, policy, regulatory, all those pieces and those relationships. Christy, adding to kind of the outpacing, what do you see State of the Union? What are you hearing from folks you're around constantly, conferences you're going to? What would you paint the picture as today, payments? What do you see?
See, I come at this from a very more technical perspective. I tell people, you guys in the room are the ones with the real jobs. Mine's just a little made up job. And so I'm not practicing payments per se. So what I see as I go around the world of payments is, real-time payments. Absolutely. Digital, everything's going digital currency, digital experience, digital, meet the customer where they are. How can we digitize that? DeFi, that kind of stuff. But the other thing is too, it depends whether you're talking wholesale or retail payments. The consumer stuff for sure, real time. But then we've got stuff going on at the wholesale side. We've got the ISO 20022 and the also real time on the wholesale side, but then that data rich stuff. And then we've got global payments happening. And when you look at Asia, they've got fantastic pilots that are connecting one domestic real-time payment system to that of another country, Singapore and Thailand, for example, and Malaysia. And then we got digital currencies, which is cool, and everybody's kind of dabbling and wondering where it could lead. And China's ahead of the crowd because they want to rule the financial world. But then there's the RBI. I was in Mumbai at the Global FinTech Fest in September. That was very cool. Just a small conference of 50,000 people, and they've got a pilot. The RBI, the Reserve Bank of India, has a pilot. CBDC. It's been in market now since November 2022, so over a year. Just 1 million participants in their little pilot. So another whole market, another whole order of magnitude that we're starting, I think, sometimes to fall behind. There's so much we can learn from these other markets.
Yeah, the fall behind is an interesting. We were talking about that previous, and when we had our conference. We do fall behind. And one of the things that I know I want to hear from each of you, it's a big ecosystem. Payments is a big ecosystem. There are a lot of players, networks, merchants, banks, and it keeps going on. The ecosystem, I know people have always pointed to, look how hard it is to innovate because the ecosystem, or look how hard it is to get it going or the adoption. The idea is easy. Sometimes the tech is fairly easy. It's the adoption. Talk to me a little about the ecosystem. What have you seen? What do you see some of the obstacles are for US? I love what you said about global. I like bringing that in. Peeling it back to the US, though, the ecosystem's a big part of it. And you've got to know it. When we get to talent, we'll talk a lot about if you're going to be a talent in this space, you better understand the ecosystem and the people in it. But talk to me a little bit about the ecosystem. You got both sides of it now.
You want to start? Or do you want me to start? So my perspective on the ecosystem is while the financial institutions are somewhat competitive, they all have to run on the same rails for the most part. So there is some collaboration and cooperation that needs to take place, and it has taken place, especially with EWS and things like that. So I think from an ecosystem perspective, we're going to see a little bit more of that going forward. We have to spend more time figuring out the commonalities to leapfrog and actually to adopt what's going on in the rest of the world. And we talked about this earlier, you know, chip card 10, 15 years ago, we were late to the game. Contactless, things like that. And it's still being rolled out. So when you think about how much further the rest of the world is, because they're able to turn on a dime or thereabouts, and we need to work better together across the industry.
Well said. Donna, what's your take on that? I know the optimist in the room. Go ahead.
Well, I think you left somebody out of our ecosystem for payments, and that's the bad guys. And that's very much more so today than ever and growing. It's such a huge consideration. It's such a huge point of defense, investment, execution, et cetera. What we are seeing in the US, whether it's scams, whether it's the reemergence of check and deposit fraud, what's old is new again. They're going to hit on all fronts, right? I've said this for decades. They're better funded and better staffed than any other member of the financial services ecosystem. They're very much cutting edge technology, deployment. Their ability to do what they do is just accelerating. We are seeing generational wealth transferred out of North America with what is going on here. To add insult to injury, the human factor underlying all this is human trafficking. There is so much success in what is going on with financial crimes right now that the level of human trafficking that is taking place in Southeast Asia is pandemic level trafficking. So if you really don't care about just the economics of what is going on, I implore you to learn more about the human factor of what is going on and do something. Talk to your parents, talk to your peers, right? What is going on is they are only going to get more aggressive. They are only going to get better at what they do. And this is a really big part of the ecosystem. Clearly, I'm very passionate. We don't talk enough about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's the part that makes a lot of what the tech and the talent piece of what it's trying to do makes it very difficult. Makes it very difficult.
Can I add a piece? The other elephant in the room is government and regulations and how all of the financial institutions are facing the same uphill battle with trying to maintain, as you said, ethical business practices, making sure that we keep our customer data secure, the payment rails updated, minimize human error, and comply with all the regulations. So if one bank faces something and they get written up, every other bank is reading what happened to them and making sure that's not happening in their backyard. So that is a huge, it's kind of a detractor to the growth of the payment ecosystem because we just have to make sure that we're meeting the regulations first and foremost before we, you know, go and develop new technology. We have to make sure what we have works.
I mean, we're a huge cog in the global economic wheel, no question, right? Even having said that, I think our regulatory framework is too risk adverse. When you look at what's going on in other parts of the world, and there is, I've actually been going through a bit of schizophrenia of late because I spent a lot of time, as John knows, going back and forth to DC, begging them not to legislate an answer, right? The technology, the solution was going to evolve before the ink was dry. Please don't do this. Now I'm becoming more of the mindset of legislatively, regulatory, they're sitting too far back on the sidelines. There's some things that need some coordinated, orchestrated effort to try and deal with. So I acknowledge the schizophrenia, but I think we're too risk adverse, and I think they're too far back on their heels. They're not part of the solution at this point.
Yeah, it's definitely, the boats are at different speeds. And we see that. And we see that with clients too. I mean, there's some tech things you can do to catch up. There's outline, we talk about all the time with the consultants here. There are things that are going on behind the scenes of clients. You just don't know what they're dealing with. And that's part of that empathy aspect when you're working as a consultant with clients. The question I'll pose next, because you guys are bringing up some deep items, which I love. The question I'm going to pose next is data. Let's talk data for a second. Data makes the world go around. Timing is money, all this other fun stuff. All what's new was old, AI and machine learning and everything that Donna, you and I try to get back in 2013 and nobody would do it. So now you're in an environment where data is king in a lot of instances, especially in the payment space. Talk to me about what are you seeing? Let's talk current state, and then let's talk where it's going. What kind of innovation, what kind of technology or people issues or even process issues you're seeing right now so that data is not being leveraged to the extent in which it is protected? I know we talked a little bit about protected. I'm a big fan of that other part of the ecosystem, which I can't believe I forgot to state. But let's talk data a little bit. So who wants to start there? Anybody top of mind as we're going through that?
I can jump in. So working in several different institutions and now on the network side, obviously the ethical use of data and making sure that consumer information is held private, behavior is held confidential is paramount. And the use of AI and machine learning to detect trends, especially from a fraud prevention perspective, figuring out where those bad guys are coming in, trying to get ahead of that and address that is really where the market is. I know we're going to get to the talent portion later, but there's still people that need to review all that output. And there's monumental amounts of data that are out there that we can't just say, okay, well, AI is going to figure it out. You have to have someone that takes a look at it and makes sure that it makes sense and that it's being used and housed securely, so that we're protecting our consumers.
I think security, data privacy is table stakes.
Yeah.
Here too, I think we've taken it too far, notably on the privacy part, for a couple of reasons. I think we kind of hide behind, I can't share. You know, there's always stated versus observed consumer behavior. Stated is privacy is very important to me. Observed behavior is convenience, speed, right? So how do you balance those? And again,
Which usually trumps it.
Yeah. And I think the pendulum's just swung too far. And I think sometimes we use it as a cloak to hide behind. Having said that, on kind of the talent there, I'm a risk geek, right? Never met a data element I didn't like. I think the gap here is the talent around the so what. And it goes a little bit to AI output. It goes to just good old fashioned SQL queries. You know, I've seen a lot of output and an analysis over the decades that miss the so what. And it missed the so what about connecting it back to the problem that you're trying to, yeah, it was cool data. They had some cool insights, but so what? And that's what AI can't do for us yet. And that's how you got to think about talent and skill and bringing those folks along.
Yeah, I agree. The AI has huge potential and we're just tapping into it now. And we've got a long way to go. I think we still got a lot of bias to deal with and haven't got to where we would like to be with AI, but I don't think should be in fear of losing our jobs, because the humans are the ones who read and interpret and strategize with that data and figure out how to get creative with it and innovate. And that's the fun part.
Yeah.
Let the AI and all the, the data crunchers do their thing, but let the humans have the fun, innovative, exciting stuff.
And one of the pieces we talked about in the prep time was, you know, as we're talking about data and the technology components that are fueling going forward, the should and could. You innovate because you should, you innovate because you could. And you talked a little bit earlier, we've done a lot of innovation in the payment space because we could. Like, look at this cool thing. Look what we can do with this. Look at the bricolage we can build on top of this innovation. And I think what's starting to happen now is what I've been seeing, want to get take from all you is there's more of a should now. There's more of a mindset of we should do this, or 10 years ago we could have done it, but it should be done now. And I'm seeing a lot of that too. Talk to me a little bit about that, the outpacing, the could, should, and then we're going to move a little bit into the talent space. But I wanted to hit on that. The second question, doubling down with that, is where's everything going? Right? The could, should now, but where's everything going? So I'll give you a little seed plant to think through as we're going through the questions. So Donna, let's start with you.
Okay, kind of on the should and could, it's a bit of a, I'm gonna go back to chip EMV standards. We could have in the States, not technologically intense. We didn't need to, right? If you go back, and please remember, I'm old. If you go back to the advent of chip and pin in the UK, they were solving for a telephony infrastructure that couldn't enable real-time payments, real-time decisioning. So thus the stored value on the chip. Way to the pin was added is two-factor authentication way before 2FA was cool. Blah blah blah. Right. So could the U.S. have done that? Absolutely. Should they? No, because that wasn't the problem that needed to be solved for. Get global interoperability and all that, but anyway, I think we were on the cusp of leapfrogging right to contactless when the mandates came down. So right thing to do for global interoperability. Also unintended consequences. I think it set us back a little bit on just leapfrogging right to contactless, but hey, thank God for a well-timed pandemic, eh?
Check mark.
So, you know, I think where the hell was I going with this, John?
Can I jump in here?
Christy's going to jump in.
From a Canadian perspective, I see this so differently. That chip and pin example is such a great example because France, when they migrated to chip and pin, all of the fraud migrated to the neighboring countries. And so from a Canadian perspective, we knew we had to do chip and pin before the US because we didn't want, sorry, but we didn't really want all your fraud. So that's what motivated us. And we were, I don't know, 10 years ahead of the US, and that worked just fine for us. Yeah. So it was a different, not necessarily a technological driver for that decision. Yeah.
Reason number 31 while moving to Canada. I get it. I get it.
And really just on that fraud note, and we talked about this earlier, is like the new methodology that we put out, the fraudsters are going to go find another channel to break in the door. So now it's online.
But one more quick thing on that chip and pin thing. So at Money 2020, I had a pre-pandemic, I think it was like 10 years ago, there was a Starbucks and there was a lineup of, I don't know, 50 people at Starbucks. And when I finally got to the front of the line, I realized they're asking for signatures on all of these card transactions. I'm thinking, we got some technology for you.
Yeah, it's you get some of the examples. One of the we did Money 2020. I guess it was last fall is when we went down there. There were a lot of incredible companies, I guess I should say, everywhere. Some weren't real, but they were there, and there was some technology they were sharing. I just kept looking at it. I'm like, this is not new. One. Two, the experience was horrible. The adoption of the experience. So let's go to UX for a second. A big part of adoption when it comes to innovation is it's got to be simple. The UX has got to be good. I'm not going to do the Venmo Zelle comparison. We've done that one enough. But let's talk UX for a little bit. When you're talking about in the payment space, adoption, use, regardless, the UX piece of it is huge.
I'm going to jump in just because I think Katie's going to bring this one up.
Okay.
Pay by bank, right? Could we, should we, right? We clearly can. If I'm a merchant, we probably should have that optionality. The UX is horrific. So, sure, awareness, but, therefore adoption, and that's kind of part of this. We're not learning from history. It's crazy to kind of watch that and the impact that has had in terms of stalling and derailing pay by bank.
Yeah, learn from history is key. We talked a little bit about the history piece, and then you're doomed to repeat it. We even mentioned that earlier. Did you have an example?
Just to your point, if consumers or small businesses or whoever can't understand it and it's clunky or they fail or it doesn't go through or they can't trust it, it's not going to work. I always used to consider myself a late adopter. I didn't have an iPhone. I didn't have an iPod until probably years after, but I certainly got an iWatch and loaded my card on there, as soon as I could. And then when our local convenience store, Wawa, for all of those who are on the East Coast, finally took contactless from a watch, I thought the cashier was going to pass out. She's like, that is the coolest thing ever. And so we have to make it easy, and we have to make it easy for people to understand how to use it.
Yeah, adoption's key. Adoption's key, especially with the ecosystem we talked about. We're going to make a shift here. We're going to go on my favorite topic, the humans, right? There's a lot of humans that work in this space too of payments, 3 of them on the stage, and we've been around a lot. The talent component of it. Let's slip over to talent. This is near and dear to my heart, as well as I know you all. None of this happens without. And this is a space that's big and small at the same time. Talk about the talents. Talk about the kind of talent you've seen in this space that does real well. If you had to describe who does well in payments, what kind of talent is that? What are their characteristics? What do they have? What's different about them? And then we'll talk a little more about what you can do going forward. But I'm interested, especially with the experience here.
All right, I'm gonna take a stab at starting this. So talent, you're right, is absolutely key. And I see this industry as a big jigsaw puzzle. And every day the pieces change. But in your job, in my job, we each are one piece of that jigsaw puzzle. And we're all a piece of that jigsaw puzzle. And you might know what the people around you and the adjoining pieces do. And you might have had a job a couple of years ago that was over there on the puzzle. And so you start to figure out, but the more that you experience and work in different parts of the puzzle, of the ecosystem, of the industry, the better you can visualize and understand how it all fits together. So people who will put up their hands to try something new or different, to get a little bit out of their comfort zone, you already understand, oh, I know this part of the puzzle, but I'm keen to learn about that kind of part of the puzzle. Those are the people I want for my team. Absolutely.
And spot on. And I think you just described most of my career path. And I do talk to a lot of folks and they're like, how did you get to where you are today? Was it a straight path? No, I didn't specialize. I started in customer service. I learned operations. I learned technology. I learned member experience. I did marketing. I did product, technology, run the gamut. Now I do rewards, loyalty, benefits, relationship management. But the one common thread is the ability to ask questions and figure things out. To your point, raise your hand when you see something, you see an opportunity. Someone taps you on the shoulder and says, hey, I think you'd be good at doing whatever. Say yes. Always go for it. Even just when I started my doctoral degree, people are like, why are you doing that? Like, I have 3 kids in high school. And I said, because I didn't know enough about how to run a business. I didn't know what went into making the big decisions to run a bank. Not that I know them all now, but I'm a little bit closer. But I say, take the chance, learn something new. And I'm going to use my quote. Growth and comfort cannot coexist. If you're comfortable in your job, you're probably not learning anything. And likewise, if you're growing in your job, you're probably not comfortable and your anxiety is probably pretty high. I'm 6 months into a job and I think I'm finally starting to sleep through the night and not wake up thinking about problems, but great question.
Yeah, and I really want, especially everybody here at Method and others, think about what she just said and remember that. That I have more conversations with folks in general on that topic. And I think it's a crucial one to grab. And in this space specifically, in payments, the relationship piece that you talked about of I learn more from, and I'll mention some of your names now, John Watkins, Ben Pye, Dean Nolan, John Stouch, I keep going. And a lot of you are in the room. I've learned more because I didn't know what you did. I didn't know your piece of it. I didn't know your piece of it. And you keep going. Asking people, that's how you learn.
Which is also, I think, why our networks are really important. And in a event like this, it's awesome. And for the introverts in the room, it's maybe not easy, but it is important. And as an introvert myself,
Me too.
I built my business because because email was so much easier. And at the time when email facilitated those conversations, I'm in, absolutely, way easier than a phone call, let alone a face-to-face presentation. But an event like this, have 5 questions in the back of your back pocket that you can ask anybody. Hey, what brings you here? Tell me about what you do. I'm curious, how did you get there? That kind of stuff, just to get the conversation going. Because talking about this continuous learning, most of the stuff that we do is not in textbooks. Respect to your doctorates. There's the best way to learn is by doing or by people who are doing.
Yeah.
Be relentlessly curious.
Yes. Yes.
Be relentlessly curious. Apparently the old guy can't hear so well anymore.
I love her. Yeah, the curiosity piece, it's key. I mean, like coming into payments in 01, debit was it, right? Debit was the new thing at that point. That's how old I am. But the reality of being curious to understand what do the networks do, being curious to understand why does Zelle do what it does, being curious to understand international remittance, as boring as that sounds, I learned a lot. And you have to have the curiosity. There's a million ways to learn at conferences. Here, at Method, when you sit and talk with an architect or you sit and talk with a designer, some of the things that go into UX, things I've learned from like Joseph Johansson, who's here when it comes to design and flow. Man, you do by asking questions, and you do in this space here because the ecosystem's so large. You better know some merchants, you better know some fraudsters, you better know some bankers, you better know the fintech, you have to, because that's how you learn, because there's no way you can cover the whole space. But if you're going to be successful in this environment like these 3 here, you're going to have to learn the whole thing. You can't just learn one myopic piece of it, right? So that's a big part.
And that's, I think, also the importance of a network, because it is virtually impossible to know everything, but it's like a library. I know exactly where to find the answer to that question.
Yes.
I'm going to call Susie or Johnny or whoever and go have a coffee with them or get on a Zoom call with them. And I did so much networking during the pandemic. I was calling up all kinds of people on LinkedIn saying, hey, I'd like to know more about what you do and how does that work? And who do you work with and who are your clients? And the puzzle, as I see it, is changing every day. And all these new players are being created and dissolving and migrating from a big bank to a fintech or back the other way. So it's always, you network to learn not only about, the latest technology, the blockchain or the AI or what have you, but also who's who in the zoo. And that's not only from the people perspective, but the organizations. What new organizations are popping up? Like, oh my God, there's this new bank called Truist. Like, ooh, where did that come from? Like, I'm trying to figure it out. It's constantly changing, and your network can really help you to keep abreast of all of that change.
Yes.
I think unsolicited advice, make sure it's a 2-way street. I've said this for years, whether you were talking about inside the confines of your organization. If you want to have the ability to say, hey, I need your help. When that phone call, that text comes to you, says, hey, you got a minute? Your answer has to be yes. It's the only way it really works. You have to give as much as you get.
Agreed. Agreed.
I love that. There's a couple of students I have here. I have said that 2-way thing, just like what that you heard it from somebody a lot smarter than me. That's important. So I completely agree with that, especially in a large, big town, small town like Charlotte too. So I completely agree with that. And for those that are remote. Katie, question. So unless you want to add on to
No,
what was there.
I just want to add to that,
Sure.
especially the 2-way street is I think you also have the opportunity to give back and mentor other people and take the time to ask questions of folks coming up up in the ranks, hear what they have to say, hear their perspectives. We all are in probably different age brackets, segments, generations. We've all entered this industry through maybe different pathways, but we all have something to contribute. So ask a lot of questions and help people learn, to your point, and be a mentor. And if you need a mentor, go ask, hey, can you be a mentor? Again, I just started a new job and I asked a peer of mine to be a mentor, and it kind of caught her off guard. And she said, are you asking me to be your mentor? I said, yeah, but I'm your peer. Yes. Perfect. I don't know everything. It's a brand new company. So, and then be humble in the fact that, hey, maybe I need help and I need guidance, and ask for it.
So one of the statements I wanted to make when we're talking about talent, and this is something that I've witnessed for 2 decades, payments is a space where I've seen and have met incredible numbers of very smart and influential women. Payments seems to have more than other parts of the bank for some reason. And that was one of the pieces that I realized at the bank. When we're talking about that, and we're talking about, and because Method does a lot of, we do tech talks specifically on women in tech and other pieces. It's a big part of our hiring. It's a big part of the work we do here. What do you see the same thing that I've seen the last couple of decades? I've been impressed with the ongoing amount. The majority of my bosses coming up through the years were incredibly talented women, and payments has been an environment where some opportunity has been there more than I've seen others, though not where it needs to be. But what's your take on that? I mean, do you have advice for folks that are coming up in that same environment with a different system maybe, but still the same, as you said, Christy, zoo? So.
Let me take that.
Please.
Okay. So when I started in customer service way back when, most of customer service was women. The operation departments were mainly staffed by women. A lot of that work has been automated or digitized, and those women have continued to move up through the ranks, which is awesome, especially in a male-dominated industry, and it's not been easy. My advice, and where I've seen it really work, is when women help other women and pull each other up so that we can all succeed. There's always that rising tide raises all boats, and that helps not only just for women helping women, but everyone across the board. It's behooves us all to be supportive of each other. And that's especially why I love women in payments. And I met Christy when I was the executive sponsor of the chapter in my former company. And I think just the opportunity to meet and gain insight and understanding of the career paths and the opportunities is just priceless.
Thank you for that. How can I follow up on that? Yeah, women. So I heard an interesting theory the other day, and there may be some merit to this. And the theory was that investment banking attracts all the big men. And lots of men want to go into investment banking. There's big bucks there and big egos and big opportunities. And so that was very, very male dominated. And so the transaction banking, the smaller detail oriented stuff, was more perhaps suited to women's skills. Although what disappoints me is that even within our payment space, we still don't see the number of women at the leadership roles that we should. And I think that's a combination of a couple of things. One is that, it's a little bit of a situation where people tend to hire in their own image. And I'm not pointing fingers, but that often happens. But also, there's this thing called, imposter syndrome and the lack of confidence, that kind of stuff. And research shows that the men will put up their hands for an opportunity when they can only tick 5 out of 10 boxes, and the women want to. I remember doing this when I was at a big bank. I saw this role and I could only tick 8 or 9 of the 10 boxes. I thought, oh, well, I better wait 2 years till it comes up again. And then I totally lose out on that opportunity. It sets my career back 2 years. But the interesting thing was, a banker told me a couple years ago, he said, I would never hire someone who can tick all the boxes, because then they have no opportunity for career growth. Oh, well, why didn't I think of that 20 years ago? But then the other part of that too was that when I saw who they hired, I thought, I'm smarter than that person. And it was often a man. Oh, darn, why didn't I put up my hand? So I think we as women need to get out of our comfort zone and put up our hands for opportunities, because what's the worst that can happen? You get a no. But what's the best that can happen is you've taken the time to put your name out there, to do all the prep, to get up to speed on how this process works so that you're ready for it and you learn from it for the next time around, or you actually get the role.
I love it. So I 100% agree. And this is probably dated material at this point, but if you've never read the book Lean In, for the love of God, go read the book Lean In. I feel like I lived it. So I think a couple things, John, you asked about the next generation. The Women in Payments US Forum was in DC last year. And I remember just sitting in a lunch and looking around the room and just literally getting chills by looking at the population of young women that were coming up and just the gamut of roles that they covered and their energy and their enthusiasm. Like I was just so excited about the future of payments and just what I saw in that room. So again, for the women in the room, plug in, lean in, ask the questions. 50-50 will take 50% of what you know to a new job and make sure you don't know 50% of your new job. So you're pushing yourself and you're growing. I put that's chapter 47. I've learned from my mistakes. So, you know, I think there was at early warning, 7 of the 9 executives were women. Pretty freaking unheard of, right? And we adopted a phrase, straighten the crown, don't knock it off. We're often our own worst enemy.
Wow, that's you can't add to that. That was huge. And you know, just as a selfish standpoint, I like in the audience, I love my daughter hearing that actually. So I appreciate that. That's huge. And she's going to be running the show soon anyway. So there we go. So what I'd like to do at this point, we hit on 2 of my favorite topics, which is technology and humans and the talent in my favorite industry of payments. But what I'd like to do is turn it to this group. There are a ton of you here. Hopefully you ate, but hopefully you left me some. That would be good too. I'd love to take questions. Anything you've got a cast here that's got so much experience right from the beginning. Let's take some quick questions. Yeah.
So hello. This question is for the whole panel. So I was researching the history of Visa because the company really fascinates me. It's a very interesting story. And I was struck by the D-Hawk guy that came in, and he kind of was this figure that decentralized and created what all the banks then used. Do you see a similar opportunity for something to happen in the kind of future of the financial space and payments, like in the crypto industry, for a singular player to come in and to build a global network for instant payments, or is Visa the one to kind of take that and run with it?
I can't speak on behalf of Visa, but do you want to talk about EWS?
Yeah, there was that little thing called Zelle. But it's only domestic, right? By design, it's only domestic. I think when you think about the hundreds of millions of merchants around the world, and John touched on this actually very early on, adoption, awareness and adoption. So you talk about digital currencies and right, the ultimate real-time payments. However, awareness and adoption and implementation, so many times, I own part of a brewery, right? And I used to love, even at early warning, when we talk about a small business solution, like, well, listen, they're just going to need to plug into this API, and then they're going to be able to do this. I'm like, I can imagine, no disrespect to the gentleman who founded the brewery. If you went to him and said, listen, you just got to plug into this API and you can take Zelle, he's going to be like, plug what in?
Oh, API, IPA, whatever.
Yeah. So my point is probably not in my lifetime, but without revisiting my age, let's just move on quickly from that. Because I think too often we underestimate awareness and adoption. and who's on the other side of the adoption curve, let alone the humans in the middle.
There we go.
This is a question for the panel. I've been recently seeing a lot of things like Afterpay and Sunbit where they make a payment for you, you pay them in monthly payments for the next X amount of months. Is that something that larger banks are looking at doing? And then what are the potential security issues or repercussions of that?
So just not speaking on behalf of any one issuer or network. So that's buy now, pay later. And we saw it a lot during the pandemic with, I know I bought my Peloton and paid for it later. So in 36 easy monthly installments. I think that's going to continue to be a thing. However, it's incredibly risky as folks layer a payment on a payment on a payment for everything from, your Amazon purchase of $100 to your couch or whatever it is that you buy. So, and I think from a credit risk perspective, we're starting to see that really topple over from a affordability standpoint and defaults on that. So it's from an industry, we need to approach it with caution and think about, is it really in the best interest of the consumer? I think it's great, obviously, in some circumstances, but I think it's also got a huge risk profile to it.
I think also this is one of these situations where the regulators are still catching up.
Yes.
And hopefully they will catch up for the benefit of the consumer because it's a new piece of infrastructure. It's a new jigsaw puzzle piece that didn't exist 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And you look at Klarna and they're kind of a little shaky. And so the industry really needs to, I think, rethink itself, even though it's still quite young, and hopefully align. I mean, personally, and maybe this is just showing my age, but I kind of think of it as kind of like, well, it's just a different version of a credit card, to be honest. But it isn't plugging into the overall infrastructure that we have in place for credit cards, where you report the outstanding credit so that anybody else who wants to extend further credit to that client sees the whole picture.
But I think it solved a need, right? It fit a demand for a generation as well as a sector, thin file, no file type sector. So it solved for a problem, thumbs up. It failed to learn from the sins of the past. We don't have any fraud. We won't have any synthetics. They're really short-term lending, so we don't have any credit risk, right? Why do you think the banks stayed out of it? They were actually new, like, oh yeah. Right idea, right? Solve for a problem, met a need. We've got to quit repeating history.
Thank you. So my name is Lauren Bowler. Thank you so much for the wonderful topic tonight. This was great to hear from you. I am a new mom, and as I go and I tap my watch for payments and I see people using their rings and other contactless payments, I wonder to myself, what on earth is my daughter going to be using for payments? Will she just have to glance at something? Like what's in the future? And I'd love to hear from you guys, like, what excites you about the future of payments? What maybe scares you? And like, what are you thinking of for the next generation?
That's a great question. And there are some pilots out in the marketplace using biometrics. So you can just kind of scan your hand and that card is already loaded. They read your palm, and whatever card you have stored in there, it's going to charge to that. I think and hope, especially from an environmental standpoint, that we get away from plastic. So it's going to be embedded in something that we are already carrying. I don't know if I would trust a ring with my payment information, but I think we're going to move away from that entirely.
I think I'm a biometrics. I think you board a plane now. If I go to Toronto, you board with facial recognition, right? You come back, it's facial recognition. John, you might remember. John, you might. The other John, you might remember this. We were going to go to thumbprints in the banking centers 107 years ago, and we talked ourselves out of it, right? For a lot of great reason, right? Lies, damn lies and statistics, but great data. that said, don't do this. And well, then this guy out in California came out with, Touch ID on a phone. And just, all of a sudden we're sitting there holding our, oh my God. I watched the second time I had to go back up to Toronto. I intentionally stayed back because I was curious how people were going to react to this. I've got global entry, I've got a security clearance, right? That should scare the hell out of all of you. Right, the government already knows more about me than I'm sure they were the least bit interested in. So it didn't faze me. Like I was like, cool, fast, cool, love it. And I hung back and I know damn well that there was people that this is the first time that they did it. And again, our human adoption curve, man, it just accelerates with every innovation. It was awesome to watch.
So I love this technology. I think it's got some fantastic opportunities that we can really streamline our experiences at the boarding counter, what have you. But I do worry about the security. I've only got one face, and if it's compromised, I can't just change my, I can change my password, can't change my fingerprints, can't change my face. I hope. So I just want to, we have to be very, very careful. And maybe that's one of the things that the bank held the banks back. Didn't hold Apple back, obviously. But in Norway, did you hear about the pilot? I think it was during the pandemic where they implanted chips in people's hands. And I know it sounds kind of gruesome, but I almost kind of like that better because you can reprogram the chip.
So I hate to break this to you, they already have your face. I don't know. I can't be subtle about that. It's gone. And I say this in all sincerity, right? Assume the worst, plan for the best, right? Assume for the worst. And I'll tell you on a positive upside of sharing with you that they already have your face. The speed of technological innovation, you see a lot. If you go through new account processes or verification, you're seeing a lot of things like they want you to take a selfie, right? There's now this dependency on liveness. You've seen what AI can do, right? Wrote a new Beatles song or something. I mean, so it's out there, but even some days, you have to kind of say, what's glass half full, right? And the innovation that is coming to counter some of this stuff is very cool. And again, I'm further thrilled because I'm watching this pace of us as humans. Adoption is just awesome.
Yeah, and I don't think that's going to slow down. I haven't seen the slowdown yet, so that's exciting. So we're getting to the end here, but I think we can take one more question if there's Joseph, is that, and one in the back. Let's go here first, and then we'll go to the back, and then that'll finish up. Oh, Dean, you want one too?
No, I have in my rider that Dean Nolan cannot ask questions.
Okay. Oh, Dean's not allowed to ask questions. Joseph.
Right. Yeah, Joseph Johansson here. A lot of the conversation, and when we think about payments, I think the lens tends to be B2C, like the
Yes.
consumer focus. What about B2B? Like, are you seeing similar trends, very different? What's that landscape looking like?
It's so I can speak from my time at Early Warning. So request for payment, right? Whether it's on the RTP rails, whether it's Zelle, whether it's FedNow, we probably the cost and complexity of corporate payments infrastructure is monumental. So they get it, they understand it, they like it, they can't yet rationalize the cost and the investment compared to other things that are strategically important to them, was our observation. So it's going to come, right? We're going to figure out a way to make that implementation and that adoption on the corporate side easier for them. And then I think you're going to see that breakthrough.
And I think you'll see it much quicker on a small business scale where you pay your supplier, real-time payment or Zelle or whatever. I think you'll see the innovation and enhancements there first before it gets to the corporate level.
Yeah, because it got lower risk.
Smaller dollar.
more talk on real-time payments. So what do you feel the drivers of adoption is for real-time payments? And secondly, do you feel the traditional system will create some hindrance or blockers to that? And by that, I mean the networks and the typical schemes.
Well, from a network perspective, we're already working on it and building the rails for that. It's a low cost alternative to the traditional. But we've said earlier today, traditional is not going to go away. We're just building new ways to pay. As a parent of 3 young college students, real-time payments is, Mom, I just bought books. I need you to, reimburse me today because I just so I think the peer-to-peer or parent-to-peer, I should say, it really, parent-to-peer, do you like that? I'm going to trademark that. I think that's where you see the practical applications of it. Whereas in the past, it would be, okay, I'll send you a check or use my credit card. But now it's that like, pay me now, or we went out to dinner and we're all going to chip in and we're going to pay each other. So that's that consumer to consumer.
I think just to reinforce one of our networking and asking people, although I said in my writer, he's not allowed to ask questions. I've learned more on this topic from Dean Nolan than I ever knew. Barriers to adoption are the participants themselves. They have this puppy so locked down at this point. If it's a Tuesday and the moon is full and you're actually in this sector, you can do a real-time payment. But the person you're trying to send to might not be allowed in the ecosystem yet. So we're kind of our own worst enemies right now on how locked down it is. Once again, we're being very, I was going to say risk averse. We're being very controlled and very diligent and deliberate in the deployment. So I think having the payment networks get in the game, I think that type of competitive pressure is just good for all of us.
Hey,
Awesome
John.
questions.
Hey, John.
Yeah, Dean, go ahead, buddy. I love you.
Listen, I just, first of all, I want to thank all of you. Great session.
Awesome.
And it's really not a question. I just wanted to build on something you all said about networking. Charlotte has one of the top professional payment networks in the country based here called PayCLT, our airport code, PAYCLT. We hold monthly webinars and publish podcasts on these topics.
Yeah.
We'd love to have anybody here who's interested in learning more about payments join us. John's an old board member. Donna just joined us as a board member. It's really a great place to learn about payments. Websites, www.payclt.com. You can see me afterwards. I can give you information. But again, thank you all for a wonderful session.
No, it's perfect. It's perfect, Dean. I appreciate you bringing that up. And that's how you learn. That's how you learn. We've had Jen Lucas as part of that too. That's how you learn. So what I'd like to do, just take a couple of seconds here and thank the panel for coming. And I appreciate it. And thank you for the help, Brad and Josh and Star and Claudia and Kate and everybody who's been a part of getting it together. This is a great show out. A little bit of a reunion for a lot of you. For me, I love seeing everybody. I didn't get to hug everyone, but I will. But I appreciate it. But Brad, if I can turn over you to kind of close this out.
Yep. Thank you everybody for coming. Just a reminder, next one, if you guys can hit the slide, actually, we've got a February 15th, we've got another Tech Talk with Bob Moista with jobs to be done. So you'll see information on Meetup, on social. And so look for us there. Should be a great one. So love to see you there. Again, if you need your parking validated, Star will raise your hand in the back of the room. If there's any extra food or anything like that, grab some on your way out. And thanks again. Hopefully see you again. See ya.